This week, Matt Alderman joins me in studio. We're going to interview Ferruh Mavituna. He's, of course, the CEO and founder at Netsparker. We're going to talk about centralization or decentralization of web application security in large enterprises. Excuse me. In the security news, Atos launches a new unified cloud identity and access management solution. ExtraHop makes an announcement. Sysdig and In-Q-Tel form a partnership. Logarithm releases their next-generation SIM platform and more. In the final segment, we'll talk about using enterprise open-source firewalls. Is there such a thing? Stay tuned to find out all that and more on this episode of Enterprise Security Weekly.
This is Security Weekly, for security professionals, by security professionals. Broadcasting live from G-Unit Studios in Rhode Island, it's the show where we talk security vendors and aren't afraid to name names. It's Enterprise Security Weekly.
The Viavi Solutions Observer Platform provides SecOps teams a powerful combination of comprehensive data for threat hunting and incident response that includes wire data analytics and enriched flow records. Using pure, unaltered packet and net flow, Observer presents views across the entire IT infrastructure with threat alert features including scope, impact, and advanced traffic profiling. Teams can use automated workflows to dive into high-fidelity network evidence and more quickly resolve issues, minimizing impact on customers, users, and business operations. Learn more about the Viavi Network Security Solution and download free resources at securityweekly.com/Viavi. That's VIAVI. Is the fear of a cyber attack keeping you up at night? Are you worried that your business isn't properly protected? Keep your network up to date and secure from vulnerabilities with VSA by Kaseya. Kaseya's VSA patch management module installs, deploys, and updates all of your software from a single console. Kaseya's network antivirus provides real-time updates and ensures maximum security. Start sleeping peacefully all night long. To watch VSA in action, request a demo today by visiting securityweekly.com/Kaseya. That's KASEYA. The greatest threat to businesses today isn't the outsider trying to get in. It's the people you trust, the ones who already have the keys, your employees, contractors, and privileged users. 60% of online attacks are carried out by insiders. To stop these insider threats, you need to see what users are doing before an incident occurs. Observe It enables security teams to detect risky user activity, investigate incidents in minutes, and effectively respond. Get your free trial at observeit.com/securityweekly. Welcome to Enterprise Security Weekly, episode 137 for May 15th, 2019. I'm, of course, your host, Paul Asadorian, joined in studio by Mr. Matt Alderman. Matt, welcome.
Cheers.
Cheers. Nice to have you here in studio. It's hard to drink and read from the teleprompter at the same time. Multitasking. Register for our upcoming webcast with Kaseya and SaltStack and domain tools. Lots of webcasts going on. The way that we structure them is the first, roughly half of the webcast is things that the Security Weekly team is sharing. The second half are related topics from the sponsor of the webcast. So you get some general knowledge about a topic and you get to learn about how the vendor tackles the problem. So go to securityweekly.com/webcasts to learn more. Let's see, Ferruh Mavituna is here with us to talk about the centralization or decentralization of web application security in enterprises. Ferruh, welcome to the program.
Hi, Paul. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's nice to have. It's been a little while. I'm glad we have this opportunity to catch up and talk shop, as it were. I am familiar with this problem. In many of the organizations that we've consulted with, this is a hot topic. And so let's set the stage, Ferruh. By large enterprises, you mean those that are developing actively over 100 or more applications? Is that kind of where the bar you think lies?
I would say so. It's not just, they're actively developing 100 or more web applications, but they're at least responsible of security of 100 or more web applications. Obviously, if you are developing, it's a kind of a bigger challenge. But even if just, if you have 100 web application in your environment, whether hosted, third party, all that, but, having some sort of private information that you care about security, I would say that's a fairly large enterprise.
Now, I thought everyone that had like 100 applications they're responsible for was all in the same language, all in the same framework, all in the same Git repository, right? Isn't that always the case?
Yeah, not.
That makes security easier, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually quite funny. When I talk to customers, and sometimes we talk about, hey, let's integrate into Sdlc, so it could be on your CI/CD, and they're like, yeah, we got like 10 different of them. So you have to integrate every single one of them separately, and 6 different backtracking systems. The bigger the enterprise is, it's crazier it gets, and like the lack of communication between departments is quite challenging.
So that could work to an advantage security-wise, right? If you had consolidated even a large percentage of your apps all in the same language, all in the same framework, if there's a major vulnerability in that framework, you've got now a lot of risk that was just introduced. Some, kind of diversification in those technologies does help with security. One could argue.
Well,
One could argue.
I guess it goes both ways, right? So if you got more technology, that means your attack surface is bigger. So what you need to be protecting is more confusing and harder to protect. Having said that, you're right. If you get lucky, the vulnerability will happen in the environments that you don't have a lot of mission critical stuff going on. So if I were to choose, to be honest, as a defender, I would choose a very monolithic kind of one technology stack. I think that would be easy because you can put a lot of defense in depth. You can react quicker and all that. But if you got like 10 plus technologies, then you got to follow up a lot of patches and a lot of risk in a lot of different levels. But that's just what we generally see in the real world anyways.
Now, do you see lots of DevOps teams kind of maybe more aligned into the different business units across, and then each of those stacks are probably different, right? They're not using the same technology, and that just complicates the problem, right? Not only do I have distribution of where my development teams and my DevOps teams are, but each of those teams are potentially running a whole different stack of technologies, which just exacerbates the security challenge, I would think, right?
That's very correct. I mean, it's almost in 2 levels. One is definitely, as you said, they got different technology stacks, even within the same company, not just different teams. But the bigger the enterprise gets, it gets even crazier where you see different teams running different workflows. So even the process of the development or the best practice or the flow of the things like the backtracking, where they store vulnerabilities, what is kind of the internal SLA, how they react to vulnerabilities, all of that is widely differs from team to team within the same enterprise. It's kind of crazy, to be honest.
Which means then the integration of security tools into that process is just as crazy because every process is different. How do those tools fit into the overall CI/CD pipeline? Where do you put them? That also complicates things as well then.
Oh yeah, definitely. So actually, this is where the centralization and decentralization discussions keeps coming back to me. When I look at, in an ideal world, and we used to do this quite a lot, we are doing less. In an ideal world, we expect a lot of centralization. So you don't want to repeat yourself. You don't want one thing in 10 different places. You don't want a private information stored in 10 different places. So ideally what you want to do in many environments, but particularly in security, you want to centralize. You want to say, hey, here is everything. Here is what I need to follow up. These are the vulnerabilities. This is the process. Everyone follows this. Everyone gets these. Having said that, the challenge, pretty much like you said, the integration is challenging, workflows are challenging, and then what we see is it doesn't scale. So there are a lot of challenges with centralization. So when I look at kind of the last decade of web application security, where we are taking, hey, I've got 5 websites to secure to 500 websites and applications and APIs and all that to secure. We kind of in between, main organizations decided, okay, like this is not going to work as a centralized solution, so we got to decentralize it. Hence, today, when we look about and when we see, what we see is a lot of departments running their completely kind of inconsistent, different testing teams. The processes are different, Sdlc process is different, security teams are kind of ad hoc, or, in some organizations, you have a couple of teams and they keep hitting kind of other departments. ad hoc or randomly, as like they're getting external pen tested, which is a good practice always, but it's never gonna replace that very consistent and disciplined way of executing this, where the centralization discussions come in, like all the advantages. So the way I see, we came to a very decentralized web application security solutions, mostly because we didn't have another viable option.
It seems to me that we need a hybrid approach. Just listening to all of our thoughts and analysis is that you can't 100%. Well, I mean, you could, but there'd be issues to centralize everything, right? Like I led off the segment saying, well, everyone just should use the same language and framework. Obviously, for business reasons alone, that's not a reality. But too much decentralization leads to all kinds of issues, right? Coming from the university environment, if we let every single department have all their own systems, admins, applications, it would be overwhelming to secure that environment. What it sounds like we need is some kind of hybrid approach that certain functions of SDLC are centralized. And I want to start there, Ferruh. What are some of the quicker wins for centralizing some of the security aspects of your SDLC?
Yeah. So actually, I believe there's a lot of a system problem and the tools and the solution problem. So when we, as Netsparker, when we look into this problem about 3 years ago, where we were ramping up on this, and we got some customers running with us for about 2 years and applying this. So we are building this best practice kind of how do we solve this problem. And what we noticed, the biggest problem is what we discussed. They got different workflows, different teams, different time zones, different people, different way of doing things, etc. So we need to get everyone together. So our solution to that, our solution to that is merging all of these into one centralized solution. So it gives you accountability, it gives you visibility, and it keeps things in one place with a certain flow. And the first key piece of making this happen, especially on the Sdlc level, it has to work with every single team, with every single technology stack. So it can be Jenkins, it can be TeamCity, it can be Azure DevOps, whatever, or GitHub, GitLab. If you've got a CI/CD deployment process and it's different, it has to work with it. And on top of that, once it's done, it needs to go through a workflow. So let me explain the workflow. Imagine in an ideal scenario, let's say in real world, this is how things happen. Application developed, someone finds a vulnerability or some tool finds a vulnerability. Then we create a ticket for, in an ideal world, in a bug tracking environment. And then the developers really actually, security team generally picks up these tickets or generates a ticket in the first place. Then the communication between the developer, hey, I got a vulnerability. Developer says, okay, now I got a ticket for vulnerability. I fixed it. It goes back to security team. They double check, it's fixed. Then it goes back to it just resolves itself. And if it's not fixed, this cycle repeats a couple of times. But what happens is, on the development, etc., this is kind of not their original workflow. So what we found, what we have to be doing, we have to work with every single bug tracking, every single CI/CD environment, and we have to work with every single workflow. So the way we automate all this process, find the vulnerability automatically, well, that's easy. That's part of automated scanning, and that's been around for a while. Integrate into Sdlc, so that means it needs to be triggered from CI/CD deployment environments. But the real magic kind of comes in what comes after. So what comes after is identify that's not a false positive. And this is Netsparker does automatically, but in many other tools, you gotta be double checking. But once that's over, so hey, I can confirm this is not a false positive and is a real vulnerability, then we push it to a pipeline we push it to a workflow. And the workflow is very configurable. So in workflow, customer get to say, hey, if the vulnerability is in one of my mission critical website groups, if the severity is this much, and if this is proven, so it's not a false positive, then what I want to do, let's say, I want to send a Slack message, and I want to create a ticket in this bug tracking system, and I don't want to create that ticket for just anyone. I want to create that ticket for the person who committed the build and triggered the build in that CI/CD system. So what happens is you automate kind of the whole process from the code is written by, X person, and the very same X person gets the ticket on the bug tracking system they normally use. And you do and repeat this for every single team. And then what you want on top of is like the visibility, the dashboard, what's happening, so you can get actionable insight. But the key point, I believe, is just the security solution gotta be integrated and work with whatever your current process, workflow, and the tool set is, whether CI/CD, bug tracking, or business workflow systems. So you might have something like ServiceNow if you want a vulnerability, and if you want to escalate it to a more business level notification messaging system, inform people, trigger some events, trigger some actions. It has to be integrated with every single one of them.
Yeah. So Ferruh, I love this.
Integration.
Yeah. This is great. Now I fully understand. I think I fully understand what you're getting at, and I see this in our own. If you've done any development, right? If you've got a business problem that requires software, that solution may look different. And what Ferruh's saying too, right? Your process for developing, testing, and building and producing, publishing the application might be different, right? I may have a different workflow where I push from dev to QA to user acceptance to production. In another application, that could be completely different, right? But the security aspect of it has to adapt to no matter what model or workflow that the developers are using, because it's going to be different, right? Did I capture that correctly?
Exactly.
Yeah, and I think
very, very correct, very correct. And what we have seen, so I've been obviously, looking into this for a very long time, and I'm sure in our previous conversations it came up. Like, I've been doing web app security since like 2002, so it's been a while. I've been doing this and doing Netsparker and automation part of it over a decade now. So, and what I observed, like the decentralization happened almost as a necessity in the industry. So because the security tools didn't integrate, because they didn't talk together, because it didn't work, so we ended up like, hey, we cannot scale this process. We cannot make it fit into the individual security systems. So what else can we do? And unfortunately, or maybe let's say the next best thing you can do, hey, we're just going to do ad hoc testing. And as we always talk, like nothing you're going to do on the automation side is going to replace the need as an external pen tester or as a manual auditor coming in now and then as an external pair of eyes. That's always good, but that cannot be just your one solution for this problem, because it's not going to solve your problem. It's not it's not a solution. It's not scalable. You keep missing stuff. It's inconsistent. There are just so many problems with it. If you look at it as like a silver bullet, hey, I've developed these tons of applications, and once before deployment, I'm just going to run it through pen testing. And it doesn't even work in big companies anyway, who deploys any version of the application every other day.
Yeah, I think
the thing that I've experienced recently, right, to speak to Ferruh's point, is if I were to develop an application I'm the developer, I'm coding, and it told me nothing about the security. There was no linting. There was no nothing. It was just letting me write code. If I then put that in front of an experienced web app pen tester, they're going to have a field day, right? There's so many other things that you need to do to lead up so the pen testers can be effective, right? And not cause me to have to go back and do a whole bunch of work. When I'm trying to figure something out and write the function to do X, Y, Z, I want the tool to tell me, and developers' mileage varies. I like the linting tools, especially with Python, as I'm not a Python expert, but it's telling me like, hey, stupid, that's not the way to do it, right? And I fix it as I go. And so my code is being developed around a framework so that as it goes through the process, it's way more successful, that the bugs that I have to fix as a result are probably less impactful because I've got other things in the process helping me along.
But to Ferruh's point is, that requires integration of that data into the development tools. And I think that's the one point I want to extract out a little bit, is because everybody talks about this concept of DevSecOps. But the only way that happens is that security is integrated in providing data and the results back into the developer tools. And they're going to vary. But that allows the developers to get the information in the tools they're using. I think the big challenge we've had in the security space for a while is we always, we put all of our data in our central management interface, and we're expecting the developers to log in and look at the vulnerabilities. No, that's not the way it's happening.
No.
That data has to come back, get integrated into the Slacks, HipChats, Jiras, whatever. the developers now have that information so that they can make the appropriate adjustments and then launch another build and go back through the process. And that's the real challenge, whether it's centralized or decentralized, is that integration of the data the security tools are grabbing and integrating that back into the development tools to really make that process work smoother.
Oh, that's very well put. That's exactly the problem. Because as a developer, you got a mind and you're doing something and you got a tool set and you got a workflow, right? Anything is outside of that is just very hard to manage, very hard to deal with. But as you're getting a feature from a bug tracking tool and develop that feature, as you're fixing a bug from your bug tracking tool, security problems should be just part of that process with an appropriate, priority on top of it. So that is key to the whole problem, to be honest. Unless you do that, security is just not successfully adopted by the developers. So two things are crucial. You got to integrate into the workflow that they used to do, however they develop, however they do their fix, because security vulnerability is just yet another fix. You got to deliver the fixes, problems, and reports as early as possible, not 6 months after they introduce it, but ideally very same day in a couple of hours with automation, obviously. And maybe the final piece of this is developers need to be, and all of this needs to be outside of security team, because whatever you go to the biggest company with the most security resources, security team is always the bottleneck. You just never enough have web security people, right? Even if you have all the resources in the world, it's just so extremely hard to hire the right people, enough in a way to scale up to your all developers and all development teams. So you need to figure out a way, and this is what we do really, how you can get security people out of security operation, if that makes sense. So developers just get by themselves, and your security team only focus on the big picture. They don't focus on, let me retest your cross-site scripting. That's just ridiculous, just waste of time. What they should be focusing on, hey, let me look at this and let me understand what I need to be doing to make our security 5% better, not how to fix this vulnerability or not, retest this vulnerability. All of that can be automated, needs to be automated. And again, lack of, challenges with the communication. You don't want developers, and you cannot force, and it's never get adopted. If you tell developers, hey, log in here to see the vulnerabilities, it just doesn't work. But if you put it in front of them, as you put normal bug requests and the bugs and feature requests in front of them, then they will do as what they do all the time. That's just their normal process.
Yeah,
they will ignore them and call them features?
The problem of product management 101.
And that's why we actually do and build proof-based scanning.
Yeah.
So before we generated proof for identified vulnerabilities, it was quite funny. So we would tell the developer, hey, you have a, let's say, SQL injection. And this is true. And they would say, oh, I don't. We are like, no, you do. And they're like, no, I don't. And this was a big problem. So we thought, okay, how can we convince developers with no doubt whatsoever that a vulnerability is real? And that's where it kind of hit me, Oh, I've got to show them the real heck, If it's a SQL injection, and if I show them the database name, database username, they know this is real. They cannot argue with that. They're logical people. They're not going to argue with that. Unless I got a SQL injection, I wouldn't know their database name, right? So that's why in Netsparker, we built the whole technology of proof-based scanning. When we find a vulnerability, we ship it with the proof, and it's included in the report. So there is no way developer says, oh, this is not a real vulnerability, or this is intended. None of that works, because now you got the actual proof. An attacker can do something bad with this.
Are you seeing trends? I'm curious, right? As you talk to your different large enterprises, I think there's this really interesting potential trend, and I don't know if we see it yet, and I'm curious, where security is more part of the DevOps team and not a separate entity outside of the DevOps team. Because that old model of I code it, throw it over the fence, security eventually gets around to it and then sends back a report. Are you seeing a shift of security capabilities coming into the development teams and working more kind of integrated in that process, or are we still far away from that?
So let me explain. When I talk with prospect customers, big enterprises, and when I tell them what are they doing, or when I ask them, hey, are you interested in doing more Sdlc, more into your development and all that? So I think there's a general agreement. Everyone says, yes, I want Sdlc. I want secure DevOps kind of move in my company. The reality is, so it's like everyone is understanding of this is the best way of doing this, and they are correct. But how many of them actually doing it? I would say it's, I think, almost like 5% that they get it right. And that's a big challenge, and it's generally a journey. So the majority of the journey, when we see, when I look at our customers, they start with what is like burning on fire. You have 1,000 applications and you have no idea what the hell is going on. So you don't think about Sdlc and all of that. What you think about, okay, let me first understand how hackable I am, right? So that's your first order of business. And once you get over that, you are now like, okay, what is the next step? So how can I get ahead of the vulnerabilities? That's where the Sdlc comes in, and everyone gets it. And again, to your question, I've seen a few of our customers actually completed that journey and right now got an extremely successful operations. And when they get there, it's almost always heavy side of that operation on the development teams. And I even see people leading those teams are ex-developers or DevOps people who kind of upgraded themselves to security DevOps kind or shifted into that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I would say definitely there is a trend we will be seeing even more. But right now, I think it's going to take a while. It's going to take us another 5 years to see almost consistently that we have got it right.
Yeah, and I think part of it to me is this disconnect of decentralization from a development perspective, from a DevOps perspective, centralization of the security function, and they don't really mix, right? Where you almost have to think about security maybe a little more distributed that overlays into that team. Yeah, I get it that somebody needs to be able to take the log data, take the vulnerability data, take the threat data, and integrate it into the SOC and manage, potential attacks and breaches, et cetera, et cetera. But from a core perspective, if they decentralize aspect on the upside of the coding and kind of aligned it into this decentralized DevOps environment, then the security operations team will have better centralization of everything that's going on in that decentralized world instead of treating security as this one big monolithic thing outside of dev. And I was just curious, how much of that we see. And I tend to agree. I think that's the nirvana, but how many people are actually there? I think there are some really, really sophisticated environments out there that have taken more of that approach. But yeah, it's still this transition that's happening.
Yeah, that's definitely the feature of web security, and that's what we've been keep pushing. And we're actually going to release a white paper around it, like the best practice of how to secure, these big organizations, how to secure 500 applications, 4,000 applications, 10,000 applications. And I guess we are one of the few who's got the resources, experience, and being in the field for so long that we are not only building the solution to fit into best practice, but also building the best practice with our customers, like understanding what they've been through, how we can address that. I think, Paul, in previous shows, we talked about this. We talked about, hey, first thing, in order to start your security program, you need to know what you have, like the discovery piece. Mm-hmm. So, for example, that's something we built, and now we got the discovery piece into the whole solution because, first you need to know all the web applications. And that's the idea. Like, as you said, the nirvana is like the like pipe dream, however you call it. What we need to get there is kind of obvious today, but we need the tools, the systems, and kind of best practice applications to get there. And, that's what we're trying to do. And I believe in 5 years or so, everyone will be in agreement. This is how web security needs to be designed and needs to be handled in these large organizations. Right now, I believe we are pioneering the way, that's being done and set up from the solution and the tool set chain point of view.
Yeah, I agree with Ferruh. It's a journey because there's so much technology. And I think we're getting closer to identifying the right technologies and processes to develop software in this way, but it's going to take years to get there. I mean, if you've ever tried to, even take an old application to write something from scratch and go, oh, I want to use this new method, I've experienced that in the past few weeks. I'm like, it'd be really cool that every line of code I write ends up in a container somewhere and is automatically pushed. The amount of work and research you have to do to get there is huge. And then you talk about serverless, and even just using Amazon as an example, my favorite kind of thing to make, I think, allow security people to understand just like how hard and how many things you have to consider in the details is when you go deploy something inside of Amazon's cloud somewhere and it's something new, typically like step one is go read this 27-step guide, and here's like that's just the first thing you have to do, right? Then that gets you to another point, then there's another 34-step guide that like gets you to the second thing, right? And then there's certificates that you have to create, and then there's credentials, and then there's like all these things. It's not easy to, let alone something from scratch, take something that's legacy and start moving into this new technology.
Yeah. I also think there's a mind shift a little bit with the security profession of really understanding what DevOps is, how do they really interact with DevOps, and get out of the mode of no. And that, to me, is a little bit of a mind shift for the traditional security teams that are out there, that they have to really figure out how to say yes and how to work with the teams to get this stuff integrated, because the scenarios I've seen is where security is kind of this separate department at the end of the pipeline saying no, then code's still getting pushed. It's vulnerable because you're not going to stop the DevOps teams from doing it. And that requires a mind shift and a little bit of different thinking from security professionals to really help.
I think
with this
Ferruh
new
was alluding
process.
to, like, there's, I think, people that think they're doing DevOps or Agile, but are really only 40, 50, 60% of the way there, which I think further, confuses security because, if you've got a partial DevOps implementation, security is confused and thinks that that's DevOps when it's really not.
But, what you said is very, very important. And I remember back in the day, I was a pen tester. So I clearly remember, and before that, I was a developer, and I did development for a very long time after that as well. And I remember my fellow pen testers, even when they're experienced, for example, there was a problem and they would suggest a recommendation. And I would read the recommendation and I would say, man, you're crazy. Your recommendation from a development point of view is maybe 5 times more complex than what they have. And possibly they will introduce 3 more vulnerabilities while trying to implement your recommendation. So,
True.
I think it's a good point that the security people needs to have a good understanding of the development process, the developer mindset. And as you said, they got to be working with them to, hey, look, we got a problem, we got to be addressing this. But it doesn't have to be my way. We need to just come to a solution. And that generally requires a good understanding of developer mindset as well. And ideally, a personal experience as a developer so you can relate. And I've actually seen almost like, let's say, a movement that now people pushing, if you want to do security, kind of a DevSecOps kind of operation, you need to be writing code as well. You cannot just do security. You are developer and security person. It's just one function. You cannot just be security person. And I think there's merit to that.
Yeah, I think that's one way to solve the security skills gap is we take developers and
train them in security.
Train them in security. They integrate into the DevOps process. We fill some holes in the industry that we have responsibilities for, and I think developers are potential great candidates to make that shift and really think about how some of these tools integrate together.
It's, I think, harder for security people to get that development experience because I think there's a huge, at least in my experience, and I've walked a mile in both these shoes, right? It's a difference between I'm a security person, I'm going to create some software to accomplish a goal, right? Maybe publish it open source and write a tool versus you're a developer that's on a team that's working on a project that's delivering code to a customer. I think those are two, yes, they're both development, right? And you could say security people gain an understanding of development with their small project, but it's not development in a more commercial software environment, which it's very different. It's very different. I started my career on a team developing software with requirements and deadlines and delivering it out to actually a retail customer. That was when I realized I didn't want to be a developer full-time. I enjoy writing code and developing software, but I didn't want to be a developer full-time. And that's how much of a difference there is between the two.
Yeah, and I think the other challenge is a lot of us older folks in the security space, and I'm old, we came from the networking side or from the endpoint side, and not from the development side. Now,
True.
I haven't coded since '96, so I don't pretend to be a developer.
A lot of the same vulnerabilities
but
still exist, Matt.
Yeah. and I guarantee you my code had plenty of vulnerabilities when I coded it. But I think also a lot of us come out of the networking or the endpoint world, and development's very different. And it's harder, I think, for networking and endpoint guys to learn development than it is for developers to learn security and do this right.
Well, that was an awesome discussion.
And, even the mindset is quite different, isn't it? So again, a short story from when I was a junior pen tester. So I was doing on-site testing. And so the customer comes in and say, how is the test going? And I'm like, hey, it's going great. I found lots of vulnerabilities. But obviously, from customer point of view, it's like the worst case.
Yep, that's bad.
Yeah, that's bad.
So it's like just your mindset, isn't it? Like how you look at the problem, what you are after, like build a breaker kind of thing. So it takes a while to understand the both sides and be, to make it work really.
And Ferruh, you said that there's a white paper coming soon to...
That's correct. So the white paper will be pretty much focusing on what we discussed, but in a very structured manner. So the bottom line on the white paper is let's say the title is, how do you build a web security program for a large enterprise? So it's step-by-step guide to, what are the problems that we are facing today in these large enterprises? What are the solutions to these problems, and how do you go ahead and build that up? So we are working on it. It's just the final touches. So I hope it's going to come out in a couple of weeks.
Awesome. You can find out more at netsparker.com/security weekly. Make sure you check there for the aforementioned white paper, in addition to this segment and other resources from Netsparker, netsparker.com/security weekly. Ferruh, thank you very much for appearing on Enterprise Security Weekly.
Thanks a lot, guys. Thank you for having me.
With that, we'll take a short break, come back, talk about the enterprise security news for this week. Stay tuned.